Hi, I am here today to introduce Bean's Big Book Bash 2024. So a couple of years ago, I looked at my shelves and thought, I have so many huge books, and huge books intimidate me. So many unread huge books because they intimidate me. I want to read them and I just don't pick them up. I don't choose them because they're large. And I wanted to get over that because I want to read them and life's too short. So just do it, right? So I gave myself a challenge and I called it Bean, Chicky Bean loves books. I called it Bean's Big Book Bash. And I endeavored to read one huge book a month for 12 months in a row, all of them from my own shelf. And I read them in chronological publication order. So I started with The Count of Monte Cristo, and what a place to start. And I ended with Cloud Cuckoo Land. What a place to end. So that was a great reading year. That year, I invited people to join me in reading if they wanted to, and I set a pretty fast pace. I know that. Some people did join me in reading some of the books, and that was wonderful. Some people read some of those books at different times in the year, and that was wonderful. I know that some people used the resources that I put up on my link tree, like some Google Docs with some questions and things, and some history and some images. But for the most part, I endeavored to do that alone, and that is fine with me. I will endeavor to do this one alone as well. But if you would like to join me, this year I will be doing things just a little bit differently. So this year it's going to be Bean's Big Book Bash, but I'm going to go between a large book and a small book. So every other month it will be a book that is less than 200 pages, and every other month it will be a book that is, I believe, over 600 pages. There may be some that are slightly less. So yes, in a month. You can do it. I can do it. What Bean's Book Bash did for me, though, was teach me that big books aren't scary. I know some of you are like throwing things at me right now. Put down the rotten tomato. I see you. Put it down. Okay, just trust me. Big books aren't scary. They don't have to be. We think they are because they're a commitment, but they're not. They're not scary, and they're a limited time commitment. And if I decide that I'm going to read this in a certain amount of time, then I know how long that book's going to take me, even if it's Barbara Streisand's 999 page memoir. I know how long it's going to take me. It's not forever. I also know that if a book isn't working for me, regardless of length, I can set it aside and pick it up when it's better for me, or never pick it up again. There's nothing to lose. There's nothing to lose in picking up my big books. This is what I learned. This is what I internalized from Bean's Big Book Bash. This year, I'd like to continue that, but I have some smaller books that are still intimidating to me for whatever reason. So I've got the big books, and they actually feel like a comfort zone to me. And I've got the small books, and they feel like a challenge. I'm going to introduce all the titles. If you would like to participate in Bean's Big Book Bash with me this year, I would so love that. I'm going to endeavor to keep a reading vlog each month of the book, and post that at the end or the beginning of the following month. And then I'm also going to host a book club on the Fable app. This is not sponsored. I was going to use Discord. I myself find Discord very difficult to manage. I don't like to participate in other people's Discords. And although for Mary Shelley May, I've used Discord, I've only ever had 2 or 3 people in there with me at a time. Mary Shelley May, not a lot of active participation. Still, I do it. I love it. So I just find Discord hard to manage. It feels like sensory overload to me. And so I was this close to going, you know what? I said I'd do a Discord, but I'm not going to do a Discord. I can't do that all year, every month for a year. So I'm going to try Fable instead. I saw someone else mentioned it on their website as a place that they host their book club. we can consider Bean's Big Book Bash a book club, I suppose. I think of it for myself more as a challenge. But if I have a month where there's a lot of people who want to participate in a particular book and have discussions about that book, Fable does this amazing thing where you can, if you want to, you don't have to, you can download an ebook for that particular club, and you can do markings right there in the ebook that they provide, which you can read on your device, whatever your device is, and you can cut and paste and copy quotes and things directly from that ebook into the discussions that we have. It also breaks down by chapter or page number what your reading goal is for each week for the amount of time that the host, which would be me, has set for that book. So it gives you really clear benchmarks. It provides spaces that are spoiler free for people to discuss things that are happening from one place to the next. And then there's also a spoiler, like more open area that you don't have to choose to go into. It looks, I've never used it. I haven't actually used it. I've set up the Fable account with the first book and with a start date of January 1st, 2024. So I've gone into it, and from the back end, it's very user-friendly. I haven't used it in an actual, like, communicate with other people setting. So if you'd like to be active, or if you'd just like to, like, sit in the background, the link is in the link tree in the comment below, and you can join. That is completely free to be a member of Fable, and it's just a little app that sits on your phone, and I think you can also access it on a laptop or a desktop. It is only there if you enter it. So it's super easy to join that room, and all the steps are there and all the dates are there for the breakdown of the first book. You can have a look at that. You can enter and participate in some of the rooms that are not related specifically to a reading goal. And then the other rooms will unlock so that you can participate in them as the dates for those reading goals. It seems to be like a great solution for online book clubs. We will see. So I'm not promising to commit to that for the entire year, but if the first couple of months go well, I'll continue that, and that will be my base for these book discussions. Like I said, though, I will also post a reading vlog, and if you want to read but not participate in like an ongoing discussion, or if you know you'd like to take 3 months to read a book that I'm taking a month for, you can also, as always, comment and participate in a conversation with me here in the comment section. Without further ado, let's talk about the books. In January, we're going to start with a big book, which means in February, it'll be a small book. So we're going to start in January with a book that I've already read the first 79 pages of, but then just let it disappear from my life. So I really want to read this book, and I really want to finish this book, and I really want to think about this book, and I would love to discuss this book with people. But that is this behemoth. Let's see how many pages it is. Without the bibliography and the notes and the index. Oh, it's a baby book. It's 526 pages without all of that extra stuff. So 500 pages, that's like a YA novel. You can do that. This is The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity by David Graeber and David Wengrow. So the Davids. And this says, for generations, our remote ancestors have been cast as primitive and childlike, either free and equal innocence or thuggish and warlike. Civilization, we are told, could be achieved only by sacrificing those original freedoms or by taming our baser instincts. David Graeber and David Wengrow show how such theories first emerged in the 18th century as a conservative reaction to powerful critiques of European society posed by indigenous observers and intellectuals. Revisiting this dialectic has startling implications for how we make sense of human history today, including the origins of farming, property, cities, democracy, slavery, and civilization itself. Drawing on path-breaking research in archaeology and anthropology, the authors illustrate how history becomes a far more interesting place once we learn to throw off our conceptual blinders and perceive what's really there. If humans did not spend 95% of their evolutionary past in tiny bands of hunter-gatherers, what were they doing during all that time? If agriculture and cities did not mean a plunge into hierarchy and domination, then what kinds of social and economic organizations did they lead to? The answers are often unexpected and suggest the course of human history may be less set in stone and more open to playful, hopeful possibilities than we tend to assume. The dawn of everything fundamentally transforms our understanding of the human past and begins to imagine new forms of freedom, new ways of organizing society. This is a monumental book of formidable intellectual range. Not rage. Formidable intellectual range, animated by curiosity, moral vision, and a faith in the power of direct action. So, I am really looking forward to this. I've been wanting to read it for years, actual years, and together we can do this. It's only 526 pages. We can do that. It looks gigantic. You'll feel so proud of yourself when you're finished, but it's only 526 pages of thought-provoking nonfiction. So that's where we're starting in January with the dawn of everything. In February, we'll step back. We'll do a short one. This is a classic. This that I've never read before. It's translated from the French. It's by Marguerite Duras. It is The Lover. I've never read this one. So it says that it's a winner of France's Prix Goncourt. The Lover has been praised by critics throughout the world since its first publication in 1984. Set in the pre-war Saigon of Marguerite Duras' childhood, this haunting story of a tumultuous affair between an adolescent French girl and her Chinese lover takes place in the waning days of France's colonial empire. So this does not sound like something that I would normally read. This is actually a book that I was going to read when I was doing my master's in English, but then did not end up reading it. So I owned it. It was sitting on my shelf. I knew that it was a book that had been assigned if I ended up in a particular group, but I didn't end up in that group, so I didn't read the book, and I've never picked it up before, and so I want to go ahead and give it a try. It does intimidate me. The subject matter intimidates me as something that I'm maybe not interested in, and the fact that it is short intimidates me. Does that intimidate you as well? I feel like short books don't have time to do all the things they need to do to be really great. But that's just my bias against short books. So this will be February's read. And then we go back to a big book in March with Death and Mr. Pickwick, a novel by Stephen Jarvis. I've had this on my shelf for a long time. I picked it up after reading the Pickwick Papers, also because it was recommended and has been recommended several times in different videos by Katie from Books and Things, who I just think has the greatest taste in reading most of the time. So I went ahead and picked this up. I think it's going to be delightful. Let's find out what it is about. First of all, look at those beautiful illustrations. Death and Mr. Pickwick is a vast, richly imagined Dickensian work about the rough and tumble world that produced an author who defined an age. As Charles Dickens did in his immortal novels, Stephen Jarvis has spun a tale of preposterous characters, shaggy dog stories, improbable reversals, skullduggery, betrayal, and valor. All true and all brilliantly brought to life in his unput-downable book. The posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club, featuring the fat and livable Mr. Pickwick and his Cockney manservant Sam Weller, began as a series of whimsical sketches, the brainchild of the brilliant, erratic, misanthropic illustrator Robert Seymour, a denizen of the back alleys and grimy courtyards where early 19th century London printers and booksellers plied their cutthroat trade. When Seymour's publishers, after trying to match his magical etchings with a number of writers, settled on a young storyteller using the pen name Boz, the Pickwick Papers went on to become a worldwide phenomenon, outselling every other book besides the Bible and Shakespeare's plays. And Boz, as the young Charles Dickens signed his work, became, in the eyes of many, the most important writer of his time. The fate of Robert Seymour, Mr. Pickwick's creator, was a very different story, one untold before now. Few novels deserve to be called magnificent. Death and Mr. Pickwick is one of them. So that sounds wonderful and immersive, and I'm looking forward to this so much. This one is 802 very thin pages. It's a heavy book. We can do this. Did I say I'm going to link all the books down below? I'm going to link all the books down below. Then we will pivot to a small book. This is another one of those books that I got because of my master's. I have read this before, but I was a different kind of reader when I read it the first time, and I'm interested to see how it goes this time. I ended up not being in the group that used it in their research, and so I did not read this recently. I think the last time I read this was in the 1990s. So that is The Stranger by Albert Camus. So yet another French, ooh, there's a bookmark in it. It's a used copy. It says used right on the thing. There's a bookmark in it, and it's from Valentine's Day. It's obviously from the library, the University of Montana, the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Library, and it says, "Do we belong together?" Okay, so, and this belonged to Castel Roulet. If that's you, I have your book. I've read The Stranger before. It's yet another one of those French translated books. This one doesn't intimidate me because I have read it, but I am curious to know what my response will be to it now. Many decades since the first time I read it. In May, we'll go back to a big book. This one intimidates me not because it's a big book, but because it is epic fantasy. And I am really drawn to this cover, but I picked it up in a free little library along with its second one. I don't have the third one. I'm not going to purchase it unless I love the series. I've owned it for several years now. Never even thought of pulling it off the shelf. Bean's Big Book Bash to the rescue. That is The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. I love this cover. I love this cover. I love this cover. I have the second book, as I said. I don't plan on reading it in 2024, but maybe if I love this, we'll see. I don't read a lot of epic fantasy that's like super, super chunky and involved. I'm gonna give this one a try in May. So it says, "As destiny calls, a journey begins. It has been 20 years since the godlike Aguars were overthrown and killed. Those who once served them, the gifted, were spared only after accepting the rebellious Four Tenets, which vastly limited their powers. Davian suffers the consequences of a war lost before he was even born. When he discovers that he wields the forbidden power of the Aguars, he sets into motion a chain of events that will change everything. To the west, a young man whose fate is intertwined with Davian's wakes up in a forest, covered in blood and with no memory of who he is. And in the far north, an ancient enemy begins to stir." And how many pages is it, you ask? It's 693 pages. So 700 pages, that's pretty substantial. The writing looked big though. In June, we're gonna pick up a little classic by Lawrence Sterne. This book is slightly over 200 pages, but it's a collection of things. We're gonna read A Sentimental Journey and Other Writings. It's the other writings that push it over, and I'm gonna read the other writings, but if you only wanna read A Sentimental Journey, that is fine, and that will keep you under 200 pages. So this is a classic, and I know nothing about it, but I purchased it because it's classic and I know nothing about it. I've had it on my shelf for a while, so let's see what it says. It says, "Love is nothing without sentiment, and sentiment is still less without love." Okay, this reminds me of Sense and Sensibility a little bit. It says, "Celebrated in its own day as the progenitor of a school of sentimental writers, A Sentimental Journey, 1768, has outlasted its many imitators because of the humor and mischievousness that inform Mr. Yorick's travels. Setting out to journey to France and Italy, he gets little further than Lyons, but finds much to appreciate. A master of ambiguity and double entendre, Sterne is nevertheless concerned to explore the nature of virtue. Unlike other writers of sentimental fiction, Sterne insists on the inseparability of desire and feeling." This new book includes a selection from the Sermons of Mr. Yorick, which sheds light on the concerns of the journal to Eliza, which records Sterne's feelings as he languishes for the company of Eliza Draper, and a political romance, the satire on a local ecclesiastical squabble that was the catalyst for Sterne's literary career. All right. So I've never read any Laurence Sterne before, and I don't really know anything about sentimental writers, but this is feeling like, and it's the right time period for, the difference between the approaches to life of the sisters in Sense and Sensibility. And so I am curious. I probably will do a lot of research in the month that we read this one. I'm excited to give this a go. In July, we'll be back to a big book. And this is a diary. This is a collection of diaries. This is Sarah Morgan, The Civil War Diary of a Southern Woman. So this is born into one of the best families of Baton Rouge. Sarah Morgan was not yet 20 when she began her diary in January of 1862, 9 months after the start of the Civil War. She was soon to experience a coming of age filled with the turmoil and upheaval that devastated the wartime South. She set down the remarkable events of the war in a record that remains one of the most vivid, evocative portrayals in existence of a time and place that today make up a crucial chapter in our national history. Sarah Morgan herself emerges as one of the most memorable 19th century women in fiction or nonfiction, a young woman of intelligence and fortitude, as well as of high spirits and passions, who questioned the society into which she was born. There you go, she questions. The society into which she was born and the meaning of the war for ordinary families like her own and for the divided nation as a whole. Now published in its entirety for the first time, Sarah Morgan's classic account brings the Civil War and the Old South to life with all the freshness and immediacy of great literature. So, I am excited to read this. I knew it would be a little bit of a controversial pick, maybe. This one, without the index, is 612 pages long. I am really looking forward to reading this. It also has pictures in the center. Very cool. Then we'll go to a short one. This one is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Lots of French on this stack, but this is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, A Discourse on Inequality. So a discourse on inequality. It says, how can we know the source of inequality among men if we do not first have knowledge of the men themselves? And I am assuming he is using men in the universal humanity term, but he may just be discounting women. In A Discourse on Inequality, Rousseau sets out to demonstrate how the growth of civilization corrupts man's natural happiness and freedom by creating artificial inequalities of wealth, power, and social privilege. Contending that primitive man was equal to his fellows, Rousseau believed that as societies become more sophisticated, the strongest and most intelligent members of the community gain an unnatural advantage over their weaker brethren, and that constitutions set up to rectify these imbalances through peace and justice only perpetuate them. Rousseau's discourse was a hugely influential denunciation of the social conditions of his time and one of the most revolutionary documents of the 18th century. So, this is going to be super interesting to read in correlation to some of the other books that we read this year. For example, The Dawn of Everything, as well as The Civil War Diary of a Southern Woman. So this is going to pair very interestingly with the content of those other two books. I am loving how that, through no planning of my own, through no orchestration, is coming about. I'm super excited about that. And who knows, the content of our fiction books may also, anything set in Dickensian London, also the contents of The Stranger and maybe The Lover, like those are going to be about inequalities as well, and power plays and Lola's digging around in her food bowl. What's the word I'm looking for? Discrepancies in power. So I am super looking forward to reading those next year, all, in correlation with each other. Then we're going to go into something cozy but gigantic. In September, we're going to pick up a Rosamund Pilcher. We're going to pick up Coming Home. If you've never read a Rosamund Pilcher, you're in for a real treat. I've never read this one, but I love Rosamund Pilcher. So let's find out what it's about. Judith Dunbar has never really known the security of a settled family life. Born in Colombo, where her father works for a shipping company, she spends her teenage years at boarding school, while her mother and younger sister live abroad. It is not an unhappy life, but it is sometimes a lonely one. So when her new friend, Loveday Carey Lewis, invites Judith home for the weekend, she is thrilled and excited. With her first glimpse of Noncharow, the Carey Lewis's beautiful estate on the Cornish coast, it is love at first sight. The lush gardens, the welcoming house, the warm comfort of the rooms with their open fires and lovingly polished antique furniture all spell unaccustomed luxury to Judith. She falls in love, too, with the Carey Lewises themselves. Glamorous Diana presides with languid elegance over an extended house party at which all the guests are witty and amusing. The reserved but kindly colonel makes Judith as welcome as his own daughter. Loveday's brother Edward and sister Athena treat her as one of them. With their generosity and kindness, Judith grows from naive girl to confident young woman, basking in the warmth of a surrogate family whose flame of love and affection burns brightly. But it is a flame soon to be extinguished in the gathering storm of war. In the danger and deprivation of the 40s, those sun-drenched Cornish days seemed as distant as a dream. Many of the young people whose carefree laughter echoed round Noncharow will laugh no more, and Judith herself has far to travel before at last coming home. If you've never read Rosamund Pilcher, and you are put off by this, or by the fact that this is maybe a book set during World War II, just know that every book I've ever read by Rosamund Pilcher has made me feel all warm and cozy and loving and hopeful about society and humanity. This book, although my copy is gigantic, ginormous, it is actually just 785 pages. So that is not too shabby. Then we'll go for a shorter book in October. And that is by an author I've not actually read before. I want to read more by this author, and I've read many short stories by this author, but none of their like major fiction. And I have a couple of their books on my shelf to be read, but I want to start small. They deal mainly in magical realism, and that is something that can either be really great for me or really wrong for me. So I am a little bit apprehensive about starting their bigger works, so I want to start small, and I have this one. I have Chronicles of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This one comes in at just 120 pages. So we will give this one a try. This says, a man returns to the town where a baffling murder took place 27 years earlier, determined to get to the bottom of the story. Just hours after marrying the beautiful Angela Visorio, everyone agrees Bayardo San Roman returned his bride to disgrace to her parents. Her distraught family forced her to name her first lover, and her twin brothers announced their intention to murder Santiago Nazar for dishonoring their sister. Yet if everyone knew the murder was going to happen, why did no one intervene to stop it? The more that is learned, the less is understood, and as the story races to its inexplicable conclusion, an entire society, not just a pair of murderers, is put on trial. I don't even know if I understood what I just read. So we will see how that goes. But I am excited to give Gabriel Garcia Marquez a real try. In November, we've got a chunky one, and I picked a nonfiction for sure for November, just in case anybody wants to read it for nonfiction November. I picked London, the Biography by Peter Ackroyd. So this says, here are 2,000 years of London's history and folklore, its chroniclers and criminals and plain citizens, its food and drink and countless pleasures, Blackfriars and Charing Cross, Paddington and Bedlam, Westminster Abbey and St. Martin in the Fields, Cockneys and vagrants, immigrants, peasants and punks, the plague, the Great Fire and the Blitz, London at all times of day and night and in all kinds of weather, in well-chosen anecdotes, keen observations, and the words of hundreds of its citizens and visitors, Ackroyd reveals the ingenuity and grit and vitality of London through a unique thematic tour of the physical city and its inimitable soul. The city comes alive. So I've read The Thames by Peter Ackroyd, and I really loved it. And I think this will be the same, only a much bigger. 2,000 years of history. This is just going to be fascinating. There's a little leaf in it. It's going to be fascinating. There's lots and lots of pictures and drawings, and it is thematic. It is set out thematically, minus the index and an essay on sources. There are 760 pages in this one, and I am excited about that one. And then to end the year, we're going to end on something that's a little over 200 pages, but it is just two different works. And I am going to read both of them, but you could just choose one and stay under 200 pages. This is a reread for me, but the first time I read it was, I think, in 2019. So I'm due for a reread. It is absolutely wonderful, and it will be perfect for the month of December as far as like feel good and warm and interesting. And that is Dorothy Wordsworth's the Grasmere and Alfoxden journals. So this says, I went and sate with W and walked backwards and forwards in the orchard till dinner time. He read me his poem, I broiled beefsteaks. Dorothy Wordsworth's journals are a unique record of her life with her brother William at the time when he was at the height of his poetic powers. Invaluable for the insights they give into the daily life of the poet and his friendship with Coleridge. They are also remarkable for their spontaneity and immediacy and for the vivid descriptions of people, places, and incidents that inspired some of Wordsworth's best-loved poems. The Grasmere Journal was begun at Dove Cottage in May of 1800 and kept for 3 years. Dorothy notes the walks and the weather, the friends, country neighbors, and beggars on the road. She sets down accounts of the garden, of Wordsworth's marriage, their concern for Coleridge, and composition of poetry. The earlier Alfoxden Journal was written during 1797 and 8, when Wordsworths were living near Coleridge in Somerset, not intended for publication, but to give William pleasure by it. Both journals have a quality recognized by Wordsworth when he wrote of Dorothy, that she gave me eyes, she gave me ears. So if you've never read the journals of Dorothy Wordsworth, you're in for a real treat. Just delightful, and I really look forward to revisiting them again in December. There it is. There it is. A year of Bean's Big Book Bash reads. Again, I will list and link all these down in the description below if you are interested in joining me for a read of one or of two or of all of them. That sounds really wonderful. You can participate. I'm restacking so I can get to the to the January read. You can participate either on Bookstagram. If you follow me there, I will post things there about my time with the book. You can participate by being an active member in or a non-active member in the Fable book group. The link for that is in the link tree in the description below. Or you can participate by watching my monthly reading vlog for the month for that book, and either just watching them or communicating to me in the comments down below. You could also participate simply by reading the books and I will never know. You could participate by watching me read the books and never pick them up yourself. Whatever feels good to you. You could also participate by not participating. I look forward to reading all of these books and to sharing my experiences with those of you who are interested. And I would love it if you would love to read some of them with me, but if they don't interest you, I get that too. So here we go. January. The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity by the Davids. Yeah, that's where we're going to start. January 1st. In the meantime, I don't know what you're reading right now, but I'm sure it's great, so let's go read.